The mountains swallowed every sound. A team of Navy SEALs crouched against the cliff. Blood in the dirt, ammo nearly gone. Above them, enemy fighters waited in silence. Rockets already aimed at the kill zone. No air support was coming. The last time a pilot tried this canyon, the aircraft never returned. Command called it suicide. Then out of the static, a sound no one dared expect. Engines low, metallic, rising fast. A roar that meant only one thing: someone was coming back for them. But who would risk flying into the dead zone twice? And why now, when hope had already run out? Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The valley was a trap. Echo 7 had been fighting for hours, pinned against the jagged cliffs of Black Ridge Pass. Ammunition nearly gone, 2 men bleeding out, the rest outnumbered and cornered. Their radios had gone silent long before, jammed by interference rolling off the peaks. But desperation makes soldiers try anyway. Captain Rivera, leader of Echo 7, leaned into the static, shouting until his throat burned. Bravo 12, emergency traffic. We're cut off north and east, 2 men down, requesting immediate fire support. His voice broke, and then the signal cut. The handset dropped against the stone floor. One of his men slumped to the ground, eyes half open, chest rising in shallow gasps. The others looked at him for orders, but Rivera had nothing left to give. Above them, the wind scraped across the cliffside. Shadows shifted in the distance. Enemy fighters were closing in, 90 kilometers away, at Forward Operating Base Camp Granite. The comms tent was quiet. Screens glowed faintly. Maps scattered across folding tables. A young lieutenant sat frozen, headset pressed tight to his ears. He had just heard something that wasn't supposed to exist. He replayed the garbled voice, pulling the waveform across his console. Bravo 12, cut off, 2 down. The static almost buried it, but not enough. The frequency was clear: Sector 9B. That name alone made the older officers stiffen. Sector 9B wasn't on any operational map anymore. It had been erased 3 years ago, after 2 reconnaissance drones and a C-27 transport were lost in the same 24 hours. Since then, the valley had earned its nickname, the Dead Zone. No pilot had flown over it twice. No command dared to send them. Inside the tent, silence weighed heavy. A colonel spread the chart on the table, his finger pressing against the shaded sector. Everyone remembers what happened here. No air cover, no extraction. Anyone sent in does not return. The younger lieutenant swallowed, his voice cracking. But the signal came through. They're still alive out there. The room shifted, officers glancing at one another, but offering no answer. Finally, the colonel asked the only question that mattered. Who's flown Black Ridge and lived? No one spoke at first. The name hovered in the air, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to say it. At last, a captain at the back muttered under his breath. There was one. Heads turned. He cleared his throat. Louder now. Major Alyssa Grant. She flew that canyon 3 years ago. Solo, under 70 feet. They said it was impossible. A ripple passed through the tent. Everyone knew the story, though most thought it exaggerated. A squad of Army Rangers trapped in the same valley. Command had written them off, but Alyssa had gone in anyway, an A-10 cutting through fire like a storm. She brought 12 men back alive. The aftermath hadn't been glory. She had disobeyed a direct order, burned an airframe nearly beyond repair, and embarrassed more than one superior officer. Her reward was suspension, her flight codes revoked, her name quietly buried in the roster. That was 3 years ago. Now, the sector was alive again, and the only pilot who had ever beaten it was grounded. On the far side of Camp Granite, in a rusted hangar that smelled of oil and dust. Alyssa sat on a wooden bench. She had been sitting there most of the morning, helmet resting beside her, staring at a bird that no longer belonged to her. Iron Hawk 3, her old Warthog. The paint was scarred, one panel mismatched after emergency repairs. The nose cone still carrying scratches from debris in that last canyon run. It hadn't flown in months. Engineers had stripped systems for review, piece by piece, until it was nothing more than a skeleton on wheels. She traced the grooves on her gloves with her thumb. For 3 years, she hadn't spoken about Blackridge. Not to the board that suspended her, not to the fellow pilots who asked in hushed tones, not even to the families of the men she saved. She carried it silently, and silence had been her punishment. The hangar doors groaned, metal squealing against the concrete floor. A mechanic stepped inside, wiping grease from his palms. He was young, barely out of training, but his eyes lingered on Alyssa with something like respect. He didn't hand her papers. He didn't bring orders. He only spoke one word: Sector 9B. The syllables cut through the stale air. Alyssa's head lifted slowly, her gaze locking on the man. For the first time in years, something stirred in her chest. She rose from the bench. Boots echoed against the floor as she walked toward the A-10. The decision was already made. Back in the command tent, the colonel clenched his jaw. "Find her," he ordered, but no one moved fast enough. By the time the base realized what was happening, Alyssa Grant was already standing beneath Ironhawk 3's wings, running her palm along the battered metal. The Warthog looked half dead, grounded by bureaucracy, but to her it was alive. She whispered under her breath, words no one else could hear. "Not done yet." The radio at Camp Granite sputtered again, the dying signal from Echo 7 bleeding through one last time. Screams in the background, gunfire echoing off stone. Then silence. Every man in that tent knew the truth. Without air support, Echo 7 would vanish into the Blackridge Cliffs by nightfall. And every one of them also knew something else, whether they admitted it or not. There was only one pilot reckless enough, desperate enough, and skilled enough to try the valley again. Major Alyssa Grant. The hangar was still. Ironhawk 3 stood beneath the dim lights, scarred and silent, paint chipped, panels mismatched. The old Warthog looked like a veteran left behind. Alyssa climbed the ladder slowly, her gloves brushing against the fuselage. She felt every dent, every scratch left from missions that should have ended her. The aircraft had been written off, but not by her. Inside the cockpit, dust clung to the instruments. Half the avionics were offline, red tags dangling from switches. Official seals locked the main systems, but Alyssa moved through them like she had rehearsed it for years. She pulled breakers, rerouted circuits, keyed a manual start sequence no one had used since the Cold War. Engines coughed once, then twice, before the turbines began to spin. The sound filled the hangar like a heartbeat restarting after years of silence. Before she pushed the throttle, Alyssa reached beneath the console. Her fingers found the folded edge of a photograph taped under the panel. It was worn, the ink fading. A SEAL sergeant, smiling, helmet under his arm. He had died in the last Blackridge mission, the one she never forgot. She touched the photo, lips tight. Then she slid her visor down and powered the last switch. Ironhawk 3 rumbled forward, wheels groaning across the floor. No clearance, no tower acknowledgement. Just the low growl of engines as she rolled toward the runway. The tower lit up with radio chatter. Ironhawk 3, you are not cleared for departure. Identify pilot immediately. She didn't answer. Throttle forward. The Warthog shuddered once, then lifted into the sky like it had been waiting for her all along. At Camp Granite, radar screens blinked. An unauthorized blip climbed fast, then dropped altitude, vanishing below detection. Who the hell just launched, the operations officer demanded. No one had an answer, but a colonel watching the screen whispered, almost to himself. She's gone back in. The mountains rose quickly, jagged and unforgiving. Alyssa leveled off just above the ridgeline, engines howling against thin air. The valley ahead stretched like a scar. Blackridge Pass. She felt the weight of it before she even entered. The memory of echoes that never left. Her instruments lit with warnings. Proximity alerts, terrain alarms. She switched them off one by one until only silence filled the cockpit. She needed focus. No distractions. No noise. Only instinct and memory. The canyon swallowed her whole. Rocks pressed in tight. Shadows cutting across her canopy. Wind currents buffeted the Warthog, shoving her against the walls of air. Too quiet. She knew this kind of silence. The silence of ambushes waiting. Her eyes flicked left, then right. Small shapes shifted behind rocks too subtle for satellites, but not for her. Echo 7, this is Ironhawk. Anyone copy static filter headset? She tried again. Echo 7, this is Major Grant. I'm inbound from the north. If you're still breathing, answer now. For a moment, nothing. Then, a broken voice cut through, strained and hoarse. Grant God, it's you, we thought. The transmission died, but it was enough. They were alive. Movement flashed on the ridge above. A team of fighters sliding into position, tubes on their shoulders, RPGs ready to fire. Alyssa banked hard, dropping altitude so fast her wingtip brushed dust from the rock face. The nose of Ironhawk 3 leveled. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger roared, 7 barrels spinning, spitting fire and depleted uranium rounds that ripped the cliff apart. Stone exploded in cascades. Figures vanished into dust, their weapons gone before they could aim. Below, Echo 7 survivors lifted their heads for the first time in hours. One of them whispered, almost unbelieving. She came back. Alyssa pulled up, engines straining. Her HUD flickered, hydraulics warning amber. She ignored it. Fuel was already dropping 70% on takeoff, now edging lower after minutes of hard maneuvers. It didn't matter. She wasn't counting gallons. She was counting lives. Ironhawk 3 rattled beneath her, every vibration reminding her the bird was half crippled. But she stayed locked in, eyes sharp, jaw set. The mission wasn't about survival anymore. It was about refusing to let Blackridge claim another team. On the ground, Rivera dragged a wounded SEAL behind broken sandbags. The man coughed, eyes wide as cannon fire echoed above. Who is that, he asked. Rivera didn't answer. He just stared at the sky, hearing the thunder he thought he'd never hear again. For the first time since sunrise, hope cracked through the valley. Up above, Alyssa banked again, scanning the next ridge. Her comms crackled faintly, Rivera's voice returning through static. Ironhawk, we've still got hostiles east side. Can't get eyes. She keyed her mic. Copy. Stay low. I'll clear it. The words were steady, unshaken, carrying the certainty only she could give. Ironhawk dove once more, carving into the canyon like a blade. The fight for Echo 7 had only just begun. Echo 7 moved in broken formation, dragging the wounded across uneven ground. One man fired short bursts behind them, covering their retreat with a trembling rifle. The rest kept their heads down, breathing hard, every step a gamble. Above, Ironhawk 3 circled like a predator guarding its prey. Alyssa's eyes tracked muzzle flashes along the ridges. She rolled the Warthog and cut loose another burst of cannon fire. Stone shattered, sending shards raining down the valley. A sniper team scattered from their perch, their fire silenced before it could pin Echo 7 again. The SEALs pressed forward, hope and terror locked together. Inside Camp Granite's command tent, the argument reached a boil. One colonel shouted over the comms, Grant, abort mission immediately. You're in violation of standing orders. Another slammed his fist on the table, yelling, if she pulls out now, they're dead men walking. Screens flickered with fragmented telemetry. Ironhawk's vital systems bled warnings, but on the ground, Echo 7 was still moving. The split inside command grew wider with every passing second. A young operations officer whispered what no one wanted to admit. She's the only thing between them and a body bag. No one answered, but no one shut him down either. Engines thundered as new sounds rolled across the canyon. 2 CH-47 Chinooks, Call signs Razor 1 and Razor 2 skimmed low toward the landing zone. Their rotors pounded the air, sending waves of dust spiraling upward. Rivera spotted them first, voice cracking with relief. Birds inbound. Hold the line. We're almost there. His men tightened their grip on the wounded, forcing themselves faster. Alyssa scanned the horizon, her stomach twisting. She had flown too many extractions to miss the signs. This was timed too perfectly. Her thermal display flickered once, then stabilized. Heat blooms flared on the southern ridge larger than rifles. Steadier than RPGs? It wasn't the SEALs they were aiming at. She knew instantly. Those signatures belonged to mobile missile units. The Chinooks were the real targets. She keyed her comms, voice steady, razor flight, brake left, missile lock imminent. Static crackled. Then the pilot of Razor 2 replied, "Negative. Terrain too tight. We're committed." Her jaw clenched. Iron Hawk's countermeasure system had already failed. No flares, no decoys. If the missiles launched, someone had to take the lock. A plume of smoke erupted from the ridge. The missile streaked upward, spiraling toward Razor 2. Alarms blared inside Alyssa's cockpit. Even though she had nothing left to deploy, she didn't think. She pulled hard on the stick, rolling Iron Hawk into the missile's path. The warhead seeker shifted, catching the hotter signature of her engines. The lock snapped over. The missile left Razor 2 and came for her. Her pulse hammered, but her voice stayed calm. "Stay on course, Razor. I've got it." The canyon roared as Iron Hawk dove. Alyssa dragged the missile with her, weaving through stone spires at suicidal speed. Each turn pressed her body against the harness, vision narrowing. She aimed for a fracture in the cliffside. The missile chased her blindly, hungry for heat. At the last second, she pulled vertical. The Warthog scraped skyward, engines screaming. The missile slammed into rock, detonating with a blast that shook the valley. Dust and fire cascaded down like a collapsing mountain. Iron Hawk bucked hard, the shock wave rattling every bolt. One engine coughed, trailing smoke, but the aircraft held together. On the ground, Echo 7 reached the extraction zone. The Chinooks flared, rear ramps dropping as rotor wash whipped the dust. Rivera pushed his men forward, shoving the wounded into the waiting aircraft. Inside Razor 1, the crew chief stared out at the sky. He watched Alyssa's Warthog claw its way out of the explosion, battered but alive. His voice cracked as he muttered, "If it wasn't for her, we'd all be scrap." Razor 2's pilot echoed him across the radio. "God bless that hog. Without her, we'd be done." The SEALs kept climbing aboard, eyes wide, faces lit by disbelief. Alyssa steadied Iron Hawk, smoke trailing behind her. Her hands shook on the stick, but her focus never slipped. She glanced once at the photo taped under her console. The face of the fallen SEAL stared back, frozen in time. 3 years ago, Command told her she wouldn't survive Black Ridge twice. One general sneered across the table. "One day, Major, that canyon will bury you." Now, with her aircraft scarred and her fuel bleeding low, she whispered back, "Not today." Her engines growled in agreement, carrying her into another pass. Echo 7 was nearly secure, but the fight wasn't over. The enemy still prowled the ridges, waiting for a chance to strike. Alyssa's Warthog circled once more, daring them to show themselves. And though the aircraft shook with every turn, she pressed on, because Black Ridge would not take another team under her watch. Not while Iron Hawk 3 could still fly. Iron Hawk 3 slammed the runway and bounced. The nose dipped, the front strut groaned, and the second wheel kissed concrete hard enough to squeal. Alyssa rode the shutter, kept it straight, and let the old bird roll to a grinding stop. She killed the engines by hand. Heat bled off the turbines in long, labored sighs. Oil streaked her sleeves as she unbuckled and climbed down. No one spoke. Crew chiefs, armorers, and clerks stood with hands on their pockets, eyes fixed on the pilot who wasn't on anyone's schedule. She passed them without a word, boots leaving dark prints in fuel dust. A matte black SUV idled beyond the hangar's shadow. Two men waited beside it, plain jackets. No rank, no patches. Faces set like shut doors. Major Grant, one said, "Come with us." They didn't take the main corridor. The SUV slipped through a service gate and crossed a strip of cracked asphalt the public never saw. Ahead was a low, windowless building with a keypad that demanded 3 separate clearances. Inside, the air was cool and still. They walked a narrow hall to a room with a single table and a picture of water already sweating on the metal. A man sat waiting, older, composed, a folder unopened in front of him. He didn't ask for introductions. He slid the folder closer, then spoke without lifting the cover. "You entered a restricted sector, engaged without authorization, and launched an airframe not cleared for flight." He opened the folder and flipped a page. "You also prevented the loss of 2 transport helicopters, neutralized 15 hostile combatants, and preserved 7 American lives." The page turned again, the paper whispering, "The outcome is significant." Alyssa kept her gaze level. Her flight suit was damp, hairline scratches of dried dust along the visor track. She said nothing to fill the room. The man folded his hands. "What I need from you is simple. Describe what you felt in the valley after Razor flight arrived." "Patterned," she answered. "Not random fire, timed exposures. Coverage crossed to the south while the birds approached." Her voice stayed steady. They weren't prioritizing Echo 7. They were hunting aircraft. He watched her for a few seconds, then reached under the folder for a smaller packet. A single glossy image slid across the table. Infrared grain, canyon rim, a tiny figure at the edge of a cut in the rock. Alyssa leaned in. The silhouette was upright, motionless, head turned toward the lens as if it had known it was watched. No weapon visible, no flight, just presence. "That's not one of our," she said. "No," he replied. "It appeared during your previous Black Ridge flight as well. Similar vantage, same posture." He tapped the corner of the image. "Never engages, always observes." She exhaled once. Slow. "So we weren't simply walking into their ambush. We were walking into their experiment." "Close," he said. "You were walking into their measurements." He laid a second image beside the first different ridge. Same figure, same distance to the ledge. "This isn't about a single valley," he continued. "It's about testing pilot behavior under terrain-limited constraints." His tone never rose. "And for reasons we're still modeling, they chose you as a constant." Silence returned to the room, thin but heavy. Alyssa let the idea sit there. She thought of the sudden quiet, the precise timings, the way the ridge felt coiled and listening. "What do you want with me?" she asked. He closed the packet, slid both photos away, and reached into his jacket. What he placed on the table was a small black patch, no emblem. No unit number 1 word stitched in gray thread. Stormwatch. He didn't dramatize it, didn't sell it like an honor or a threat. "This is a program that does not exist on paper," he said. "There are valleys that behave like that one. There are hands you won't see, and you think I can see them," she said. "I think you already do," he answered. He rose, gathered the folder, and left her with the patch and the hum of the vent. They drove her back without detours. Camp Granite looked the same from the outside fences. Towers, sodium lights. On the inside, eyes tracked her again, but with a new kind of caution. No apology waited on the flight line. No reprimand, either. The old Warthog sat under a tarp, scorched and stubborn, as if it had known the conversation before she did. 2 weeks passed without a briefing. The story traveled in whispers and then evaporated. What remained was movement quiet crews, closed hangars, and requisitions no one signed. The new airfield had no name on its gate. From the air, it would look like a factory. From the ground, it looked like a secret that didn't care if you guessed it. Iron Hawk 3 sat in Base 6, not quite new and not quite the same. Engine panels were replaced, hydraulics rebuilt, avionics cleaned of the red tags she remembered. Someone had poured time and money into resurrecting a ghost. A small detail waited beneath the canopy frame. Fresh paint, sharp letters, no squadron badge. Stormcaller. Alyssa touched the edge of the name with her glove. She sealed her helmet, climbed in, and settled the harness straps the way her hands remembered. The cockpit no longer argued with her. It welcomed her back. Ground crew signaled, but no one waved like a fan. She taxied slow, tested the brakes, and lined up on a runway with no designation. The radio clicked once, then a voice she didn't know came through. Stormcaller, cleared for departure. It said, no altitude restrictions. Corridor open. No call sign exchange. No numeric block. Nothing to put in a log that didn't exist. She could have answered. Instead, she reached up and turned the comm cold. Some flights are quieter without witnesses. The throttles went forward. Ironhawk 3 rolled, gathered speed and shrugged itself into the gray. The runway fell away, replaced by a sky that waited without questions. She leveled for a beat, then angled toward high terrain that wasn't on standard maps. Somewhere out there would be another ridge, another silence tuned like a tripwire. If someone was measuring, she intended to measure them back. No banners hung in this airspace. No headlines would write themselves about what lifted here. Just the weight of a pilot and a machine, and the lines they refused to cross until they had to. Cloud tatters slipped past her canopy. The world below shrank to contours and shadows, clean and clinical. Her heartbeat found the old cadence count. Scan. Breathe. Somewhere, a figure would be standing again, still as a post, head turned toward the sky. Somewhere, a set of hands would be timing her dive and her climb. But this time, the watch wouldn't be one-sided. The A-10 banked and climbed. Engines steady, paint still fresh around the name. Stormcaller moved like a statement, not an argument. And the ridge ahead waited, unchanged and unworried. Was she fighting an enemy in the rocks or a hand behind the curtain that wanted a better set of numbers? The question followed her into the thin air, unanswered and useful. Either way, the sky would hear from her first.